There are 298 prisoners on death row in the state of Florida. This is part 18 of the series. CARLTON Francis, 48 years old, 25 years on death row. The bodies of 66-year-old twin sisters Claire Brandt and Bernice Flegel, both of whom had sustained multiple stab wounds, were discovered in their house on July 24, 1997. Investigators at the scene discovered 3 knives that were out of place, one of which had blood remnants, as well as several shoe prints within the house, some of which were consistent with CARLTON Francis' shoe size. 16 knife wounds, some of which were 3 to 4 inches deep, perforated Claire Brandt's lung and cut her jugular vein. 23 stab wounds, some of which were 4 to 5 inches deep, were dealt to Bernice Flegel, severing her jugular vein as well. The sister's next-door neighbor, CARLTON Francis, resided with his mother, Eleanor Goods, his 2 nephews, and his ailing aunt. Francis occasionally received financial assistance or trips to school from the sisters, who were good friends with Mrs. Goods. Francis' nephews claimed to have seen him nearby the sisters' house around the time of the killings, wearing a t-shirt with a crimson stain on the shoulder. On the day of the killings, Mrs. Brandt's daughter noted that the sister's car was missing and the front door was ajar when she arrived for a visit at around 4 p.m. She entered the house and discovered the bodies of her mother in the living room and her aunt in the kitchen. A number of little goods, including jewelry, old coins, pocket watches, and a black radio, were missing upon search of the home. On the day of the killings, Francis went to see a body named CJ at around 3:40 p.m. CJ acknowledged selling Francis multiple times. According to his testimony, the car Francis was operating was the identical one that had been taken from the sisters. Francis requested to use a wheelbarrow and some gasoline after viewing a TV report about the killings. He then set fire to some clothing, a duffel bag, and what seemed to be a woman's wallet and passport. Francis took a taxi back to his area around 7 p.m. Police questioned him and his mother, but he was unable to produce the clothes he had been wearing during the day. Later, Francis made an attempt to convince CJ to pawn some valuables like coins, jewels, and a black radio, but CJ refused. Further investigation led to the discovery of various items belonging to the sisters in a trash heap next to CJ's home. SONNY JEFFRIES, 60 years old, 24 years on death row. In her capacity as a property manager, Wilma Martin was in charge of collecting rent from tenants. Kevin Jeffries, Roxanne Jeffries, and Tammy Avant, all of whom are related to Sonny Jeffries, became Martin's tenants. Sonny Jeffries relocated to Florida from New Jersey in the summer of 1993, where he met Harry Thomas, the brother of Tammy Jeffries' boyfriend. On August 20, 1993, Martin's body was discovered. She had died from many stab wounds as well as being kicked or stomped. At the scene of the crime, a bloody footprint and fingerprint were discovered. A number of jewelry items were stolen and afterwards pawned. Sonny Jeffries and Harry Thomas were overheard discussing going out, robbing and killing someone, according to Roxanne Jeffries, who testified about it. Roxanne saw that Jeffries had rings that he had never had before after Thomas and Jeffries had returned from a trip to Disney World. Harry Thomas's brother Dennis testified that he also overheard Thomas and Jeffries discussing robbing Martin. He overheard the two talking about how Martin would make a suitable target because she collected rent. Although Jeffries may have worn shoes of the same type that left the print at the crime scene, laboratory tests could not definitively say that Jeffries' shoes were the ones that left the print. Further examination of the fingerprint discovered at the crime scene revealed that it matched Jeffries. Robert Morris, 60 years old, 24 years on death row. On the morning of September 2, 1994, Violet Livingston's son found her body. The body was discovered in between 2 unmade mattresses. Her head was completely covered by the bed linens. The victim's walking cane was discovered on one of the mattresses, and blood was discovered on the walls. Multiple injuries were the cause of death, according to the medical examiner's testimony. A cerebral hemorrhage, rib fractures, bruising, lacerations, and mechanical asphyxia from suffocation were all sustained by the sufferer. Her neck wounds were consistent with having been strangled. Her right forearm, hand, and knee also bore protective scars. The majority of the wounds were consistent with cane-related beatings. The victim was alive at the start of the attack, according to the medical examiner's testimony, even if the order of the wounds could not be determined. A screen was propped up against the building outside the flat. It was no longer attached to the kitchen window. Even though the window was still closed, someone had smashed the glass to get inside the apartment. The porch lights cover had been removed and set on the ground, and a yellow chair had been positioned underneath. On a partially unscrewed light bulb that was outside of the apartment, Morris's fingerprints were discovered. 2 areas on the victim's body and the kitchen curtain both had fluids with DNA in them. The DNA in these samples matched Morris. His valuables included a number of the victim's things, including several coins. Morris allegedly used rare coins to make purchases at a petrol station close to the victim's home. He admitted trying to take a bicycle from the deceased's apartment building when he took the stand, but he denied killing the victim. Additionally, he acknowledged that he removed the light bulb and proceeded upstairs after spotting a bike at the top of the stairs. He said that the bike was locked and that he was unable to remove it. James Ford, 63 years old, 24 years on death row. Greg Mallory and James Ford worked together at the South Florida sod farm in the outlying Charlotte County. On April 6, 1997, Ford made arrangements to go fishing with Greg and his wife Kim on the sod farm. Greg and Kim Mallory's bodies were discovered on April 7, 1997. They were in a field close to the pond. The Mallory's 22-month-old daughter was discovered in their truck, still alive but exposed to the elements. According to the medical examiner's testimony, Greg Mallory was bludgeoned with an axe at least 7 times before having his throat sliced. He had also been shot in the back of the head with a .22 caliber bullet. Ford essayed Kim Mallory before hitting her 9 times in the head with an axe. He then put the barrel of a .22 caliber pistol in her mouth and fired. Ford was connected to the crimes because he was spotted with blood on his hands, face, and clothing on the same day of the murder. John Huggins, 61 years old, 24 years on death row. Carla Larson dropped her daughter off at daycare on June 10, 1997, and then left for work. She informed a colleague that she was heading to the grocery store before lunch to buy food for a meeting later that day. She bought meals according to a receipt, but Larson never showed up for work. A Ford Explorer sport utility vehicle that resembled Larson's SUV was seen by numerous witnesses in a forested area. Co-workers discovered Larson's death 2 days later after being led by witnesses who observed the SUV in the woods. Larson died of strangulation, and her belongings, jewelry, clothes, and a purse were all vanished. John Huggins, his wife Angel, and their 5 children were in the Orlando region on the day of Larson's disappearance. Faye Blades, the mother-in-law of John Huggins, testified during the trial that she saw an unidentified white SUV in her carport on June 10, 1997, when she returned from work. Blades' neighbors later reported that the Ford SUV had been spray-painted black. Police were called to check a flaming truck on a deserted Cocoa Beach property on June 26, 1997. It was identified as being Larson's white Ford Explorer. John Huggins and his sister-in-law, with whom he had started dating, left Florida on June 27, 1997. Later, Larson's murder was covered on the television program America's Most Wanted. Angel Huggins contacted the police because she thought her husband had killed that person. Police searched Blades' home and the shed on her property 3 times in late June and early July, but no incriminating materials were discovered. Blades carried out her own investigation and discovered jewelry in her shed that was subsequently determined to belong to Larson. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.